You have to know your data better than the AI tool that you're using. There's no shortcut there.
Today, my guest is Kyle Soucy, a UX researcher with over 25 years of experience. She is the founding principal of Usable Interface and one of the most respected voices in the research community. In this episode, we dive into how to use AI for research without falling into the traps of vagueness, biases, and hallucinated insights.
You can ask it to cite 3 participant observations that led to this insight. And I find if you ask for more than one, it's harder for it to lie because sometimes it will. I've heard people say that it made up a name of a participant I never even had. And that's scary. That's very scary.
So if you've been curious on AI in research, but don't want to lose trust or rigor, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Kyle. I'm so excited that you're here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited for today's topic, which is how can we use AI to actually do trustworthy research like personas and journey mapping? You've been in the research world for a while now. And in your most recent talk, you mentioned you didn't jump into the AI trend right away, and you were a little bit skeptical in the beginning. So what has happened that changed your mind around AI?
Yeah, I was highly skeptical when all this started bubbling up, I guess 3 years ago or so. I just wanted to stay far away from it. It really did scare me. Yes, there was a little bit of that, is this going to take my job fear? But also, I just didn't have a lot of trust in the technology. And I remember I would talk to other researcher friends about it, and everyone would be like, hey, how do you feel about this? And there was a real consensus of like, interesting, but I'm going to stay away. But it took, for me personally, some experimentation and some exposure and trying out some of these tools to really see how they can be harnessed in a good way. I definitely see a lot of misuse, which is something to be aware of. But when I started using the tools, and I'm not talking about just ChatGPT or Claude, when I was using AI analysis tools that were specifically built for conducting UX research, like Hey Marvin or Dovetail, I was actually very impressed. So that's what changed me and my views on it.
So you mentioned like some of the integration of existing tools like Marvin and Dovetail, and they do a lot of AI transcribing and tagging these AI-aided feature. But in my research, there are a whole new wave of AI research tools. They're very experimental. They claim they can replace researchers to do user moderating a user interview, or some of them would come up with synthetic users to simulate what would happen as a persona of yours. So they will react to your product ideas and so on. So what's your take on these type of tools? And yeah, exciting or risky?
Very, very risky. There is a lot to take in here in the world of AI and UX research. When it comes to AI moderation and using synthetic users, that is kind of getting into an area that I think we have to be very careful. So I've used a tool called Outset for AI moderation recently, and that's something where I got to say, I was not impressed at all. I actually acted as a participant. And what I found was that it tested my patience a lot. Being interviewed by a chatbot, when you're being asked repetitive questions, it felt pretty endless. Like it felt more draining to talk to a chatbot than to an actual human being. It just didn't feel like this was ever going to end. So 30 minutes really felt like an hour. There's some great work that's being done in our industry by people to really evaluate these tools properly. And I'm so grateful for it. Nikki Anderson is actually running a research study now on this tool. And I'm very curious to see what her results are and if people felt the same way I did, taking these kinds of using these kinds of AI moderators. And I've actually heard from the folks at Outset touting the benefits of AI moderators. And they like to use the example of someone researching a sensitive or personal subject matter. And the fact that users, participants might be more willing to open up to someone or to something rather than someone. And I can understand that angle, but in my experience, over 20 years doing this, these sensitive topics or anything that's possibly based in trauma or anything, a human touch is needed. And typically there's more skepticism and worry and concern about where is this data going? Who's collecting it? Where is it going to live? And without some kind of human reassurance, I just don't see that that's really a benefit of this tool. So I'm keeping my eye on it. I am not seeing it right now in its current shape as being helpful. Who knows? Maybe in the future it could be. So I am trying to keep an open mind. When it comes to synthetic users, though, I've got much to say on that. I'm a researcher. Connecting with human beings is what I do. That is my job. I cannot imagine how using a synthetic user in the place of an actual user is going to be good for this industry or for the products that we create. I have read a lot of case studies on it, and I am not impressed at all with what I've learned. With synthetic users, for anybody that's not aware, it's an artificially created user profile, pretty much. It's just a simulation of what real users would do. And what I found is that it really lacks that real insight. You can't replace real human data. It's only good at assumptions. And they're only going to be as good as the assumptions used to create them, which is very tricky. And that's where a lot of bias comes in. So risk of bias, they reinforce the stereotypes or miss key user behaviors if they're just not very carefully constructed. But I do find that there is a place for them, right? And I might get some flack for this, but I think we can use this as a helpful tool to actually help us with our moderation skills or a modeling tool. So let's say we have a very high complex user group that we're talking to. They practically speak another language that we're just not, we don't have that domain knowledge to really understand them. We can model this user profile and using something like synthetic users and try and run our scripts through with them, see how they might respond just in preparation for conducting real interviews. And in that way, I think it could be very helpful. So thinking of them as placeholders and not replacements for real user research is where they could shine.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. That's such a good use case and it makes a lot of sense. It's like we can use it to train ourselves, like training, like maybe newer, inexperienced researchers in this low stake environment. And I can relate a lot. I currently work in the data infrastructure space that I know zero about before I start. So there's a lot of barrier for me to just start talking data. And data infrastructure right away. So that's such a brilliant use case. So I'm glad you think about that. So now I think we're getting to the exciting part and let's get really practical. I want you to walk us through your actual AI assisted workflow for personas and journey maps.
Yeah, sure. So it's really a very similar process to how you would do a journey map or persona if you were manually creating it without the help of AI. So we're first going to collect all of our data. So what does that mean exactly? So that means your interview transcripts, research reports, if you've conducted user research. If you're doing proto personas, which for anyone who doesn't know, that is basically a persona that is based on assumptions. So you might have old data or you might have really just a team's idea of who the user might be. They haven't done research yet. And if you're doing proto personas, you want to collect any kind of secondary research documents to analyze. It could be brand strategy, industry reports, market research, surveys, customer service reports, anything like that. All of these documents have to be collected in order to feed that into your AI tool. Now, when it comes to the documents, it's really great at the different formats that you can put in. It can take anything from, PDFs, JPEGs, PNGs, Word docs, CSV files, Excel files. All of these can be uploaded, even code. So the one thing I always make sure to stress, though, is that you have to make sure you're working within the guidelines of your organization's data privacy rules. Some of these tools are banned for good reasons because it takes the data that you provide it and will train on it. Most of these tools do. Some of them train by default, like ChatGPT. You can get paid accounts, but even with the ChatGPT Plus paid account, it's still training on your data. You have to get the team account in order for it to not do that and to be more secure. So just be very aware of the tools you're using, the security level, and make sure it's okay with your organization before you do that. Once you have all your data there, it's uploaded to your tool. The next thing you do is prompt the AI. And with the prompts that you use, it really, so it depends. So for personas, you want to include a prompt that includes what the product is, who uses it, why they're using it, so the user goals, and the information that you want to include in the persona. Is it motivations, challenges, needs? This is the hard work that you don't want to just leave up to the AI tool, right? You don't want to just say, give me a persona, and then it magically creates whatever it thinks you want. You should know what your team needs to align on, what that persona should include. Perhaps you don't need certain information. You don't want to leave that up to the tool. So that's still the heavy lifting we should be doing.
So for personas, like everything ideally, what you put in the output should be useful. So how did you decide on what's the best categories or any of these things you want to include, just for people who are not as experienced with research?
Oh, that's a great question. So deciding what elements to include is hard, right? And it really depends on what you're building and the team knowledge, or what knowledge they need to have. Sometimes things are obvious and maybe you don't need to take up that precious real estate on the persona for it, and other things may not be. What I always say is that the key thing is to know that every element on your persona should serve a purpose by helping the team to either better understand and or empathize with the end user. If it's not doing that, it doesn't belong on the persona. And I like to use the example of something that's included a lot. Sometimes you'll see these really cool, slick design personas that have sliders where it'll talk about personality traits, like, is your user more introverted, more extroverted? Are they agreeable? Are they a challenger? And not to say this information is not important, but perhaps for the product that you're building, do you really need to know that information? Is it more important to know their tech savviness or something like that? So think about, if you're making a dog walking app, you want more information about their dog lifestyle rather than the personality traits of the persona themselves. So just constantly questioning that is key.
To start a persona project like this, you start with research as usual, and then you uploaded all the raw data. Have you experimented with what type of data would give you the best result for these type of projects?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. It's always nice when you can have actual interview transcripts. Uh, Now, that being said, I don't rely completely on transcripts because oftentimes it's not what people say, it's what they're doing. I'm a behavioral researcher, right? So I really key in on that. Sometimes it's not just a direct interview with predefined questions. It could be them showing me something, and I could be doing uh, a field research study where I'm in their home and they're showing me how they're doing something. And oftentimes it's just that thing that they're doing that's not said, that's so key. And if you only read the transcript, you would be missing that key thing. So if that's not in the transcript, you want really good research notes. So the researcher's notes or anybody observing, that helps out a lot. I would say that more so than reports. Reports are okay, but it's definitely secondary to the actual raw notes from research. Um, Everything else, like survey data, I find it gets more and more summarized. It's like the AI tool is summarizing something else that was already a summary, and it just gets more and more just abstract and a little vague. So I like when I the AI tool can do something and it can point back to a direct quote that supports it or something like that.
And the nonverbal is very valuable. So now you gather raw data, you upload it to your GPT or Claude, whatever tool that you decide to use, and then you prompt it. Can you walk us through a little bit more on what your prompt look like, and then what do you ask it to do?
Yeah, yeah. So for personas, like I mentioned, you want to make sure to add to prompt the tool to give you only the information that you want to include. Let's just assume you wanted to know the motivations, the challenges, the needs of the end user. The prompt would simply be, the company name, to say company X is redesigning their product Z to better speak to their target audience and explain the product's primary audience is X. Just you name the user group or whatever information you can to help it to understand who the primary audience is. And then I add a line like, according to the marketing team, the target audience is defined as, and give the definition. And then the primary audience uses the product to accomplish these goals. And then I simply instruct it to write a persona for that primary audience based on, and I give it the everything I want it to include. Make sure it includes values, motivations, affinities, whatever it may be. Now, the key here is it tends to be a very long prompt because I actually define out certain things. Like if I want it to include affinities, I will say an affinity meaning brands, organizations that share a similar target audience or a common interest or value. If I say a job to be done, if I want it to include that, I actually define what job to be done means, because oftentimes even we as UX researchers don't even agree on that. So how can I expect the AI tool to give me what I want if I'm not defining it? So I try to be detailed in it. But it's a careful balance. You can't be too detailed because I do notice that the AI agent will sometimes get confused or it will hallucinate a little bit more if it's overwhelmed by this long prompt. So not pages, but paragraphs.
That makes a lot of sense. So I know you have shared some of your example prompts in your slide share.
Mhm.
So is it okay if I included that in the show notes so people can
Yes.
look at?
Yes, absolutely. That and then even possibly more detailed is an article I wrote on Medium about it. So I also give you that link if you want to include it. I should mention too, I was just talking about personas with journey maps. It's a very similar process for the prompt. You want to include who is on the journey. So who is, meaning your persona. So you feed that into the data set as well. Name what journey they're on, the stages of the journey, and the information that we want to include in each stage. So, do you want your journey map to include actions, emotions, jobs to be done again, or thoughts? Anything like that should be included in the prompt. I find that some people will use AI to create a journey map and it'll just feed the tool the persona and just say, just give me a journey map. And that's not going to give you what you really need. I think as researchers, again, we have to do that heavy lifting. We have to decide what the stages of the journey are, not leave it up to the AI tool. I think we can do a better job at that. I found in my experience anyway. And when it comes to defining what should be included in the journey map for each stage, again, only you know your team well enough, the product well enough to really understand what they need from a journey map to make sure it delivers.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. Like, you have to do the hard work to scaffold your artifact and then ask AI to help you fill it up instead of just leave everything to your AI to do. We all know like AI, LLM is very prone to hallucinate. Like, they will always fill in the blank. So I wonder, how do you reduce some of the hallucination and how do you catch some of the errors if they do make the mistake?
Yeah, there's no way around it. You have to know your data better than the AI tool that you're using. There's no shortcut there. The tool is going to help you kind of wrap your brain around the data better, but you need to know it well enough to know if it's actually doing that job correctly. So you asked a great question, which is, how do you reduce or catch these mistakes? There's a lot of things. You ask for evidence. So I will ask the tool some follow-up prompts. What data supports this insight? Which participants, if I gave it transcripts, actually said this or did this? Can it be traced back to a specific quote or a moment? I think that there are red flags that you can be aware of, like, is it vague? Is it obvious? I think these tools are very good at pointing out the obvious, sometimes full of buzzwords. There might not be any real nuance or tension or contradiction. And that's not what real research is like. It's not always obvious what the themes are. We really have to work hard sometimes at finding them. And you also want to look out, like, could what it's spitting out back at you, could this analysis could be about any product, or is it really specific to that product? So those are some things to keep in mind. And I would say some other things. This sounds a little funny, but have multiple tools at your disposal if you can. I use a few, and I will actually rerun prompts with the same data set and see if the results hold. Some are better than others at being able to trace back to actual data, but it's really neat to see if the results hold up. And that's kind of a way to cross check. But you want to go back to your raw data, always go back to your notes and your transcripts. What I hate to see is researchers just loading up this data, loading up their data set and being like, oh, great, I never have to look at that again. It's like, no. That AI tool is going to spit something back at you, and you need to just validate it and make sure, do your own analysis as well. It does help you and it does make some things quicker, but you should be doing checks.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that sounds like you have to still manually like consume all of the data you upload, form some of your opinions first, and then that will help you go through everything that the AI generated. And like, when you see something vague, buzzwordy, maybe it doesn't look familiar from your own like analysis, ask the AI to quote where this information is coming from.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that too. Two other follow-up prompts that I find are very helpful with asking for evidence. You can ask it to cite 3 participant observations that led to this insight. And I find if you ask for more than one, it's harder for it to lie, because sometimes it will. Sometimes it will make up. I've heard people say that it made up a name of a participant I never even had. And that's scary. That's very scary.
Yeah,
So it
classic AI.
right? Yeah. So if you really put the pressure on, I think that helps. Also, another one is show your reasoning step by step. That also helps too when you're trying to validate it on your own. I like to do those 3 things. what quotes or behaviors, asking for 3 observations that led to it, and just showing me your reasoning.
Yeah. And you mentioned that sometimes you will also ask the AI to label any assumptions that they have made. So how effective is that in practice?
So there can be hallucinations there, but overall, I have personally found it very effective at really identifying where the gaps in the research are. So where the data set is incomplete or lacks specific information, I instruct it to not. I give it permission to say I don't know. And if you give them in the prompt, if you give the tool the out, it will often take it, right? Because its job is to predict. That's really what it is. It's a predictive model. LLMs, you say Mary had a little, it's going to say lamb. That's how it works. So it's doing its job correctly by making stuff up. We hate that as researchers because that's not what we want it to do, really. But it's really doing what it was made to do. So you have to instruct it not to do that. And instead, if the data set is lacking in any way for any kind of assumptions, say the assumption is being made here. You can clearly label it any way you want. I just have it say, just mark it with an assumption. And I I actually said that I want to distinguish it from the data-driven insights. And it usually does a very good job at that.
Oh, wow. So one, give the AI permission. If you don't know, just don't guess. And then label anything that you made an assumption. Yeah. Any other AI user research technique that you also discovered and want to share with us?
Let's see here. Like some of the things I do in the real world without AI tools still translate when I'm using an AI tool. So, for instance, for a proto persona, when we don't have actual data, but we still want to try and build something to help our design teams, I actually like to use behavioral prompts. And a behavioral prompt is basically saying, let's say as a team, you're trying to understand who your user is, saying as a team, if the persona were to do X, how would they feel about that? What would they do next? What would be the next step they would take? And you try to walk through these prompts. And usually when I'm running a workshop with stakeholders and we're trying to figure this out, I'll have like 40 different behavioral prompts that will really get them to think about the actions that are being taken and what they're doing. And I can do the same thing with the AI tool. So based on the persona, or if we're trying to create a persona based on the data set I give it. So it could be the survey data, the customer, the market research data, or anything I feed it. Based on that, what would be the way that this typical user group would respond to this prompt? And that helps to craft the proto persona as well. And with journey maps, it's kind of similar. I will say there is some things that I don't do. I don't trust. So I do it in the real world with the manual creation process, but not in the AI creation. And that would be, I think a journey map is only actionable and really useful if it has a swim lane that is all about the opportunities or the solutions lane. Some people will have AI create this for them. I do not think that this is wise. In my experience, the only people who really understand the problem enough to dive in deep on the problems and the solutions is really the team. The tool will point out the obvious, and it's usually nothing very groundbreaking. And that to me is a team activity. That's what you workshop together. You take your journey map, your persona, and you come up with the solutions, and do a prioritization exercise. I would not leave that up to IA to do,
That makes
or AI.
sense. Yeah. You still have to, still have to do your homework.
Yeah.
And in your experience, like using AI to create a lot of these projects, how much more efficient you think AI can get you compared to the pre-AI world?
So it does help. I can't deny that, right? When I am working on a project and I'm allowed to use AI tools or they are actually wanting us to, uh, that's helpful, and it can be kind of a relief because it does, help you to see the forest for the trees, as they say. Sometimes you can get lost in your data, and it's hard to do that zoom out. And I think that's where AI shines. So you still have to know your data, but what I am finding, the minutia that I would get wrapped up into, and it would take long to do, that I no longer really have to do if I'm using AI, is creating my, I guess you could call it finding analysis grid, where what did every single participant say or do for each question or each task, whatever type of research you're doing. It creates that grid automatically. Like, Hey Marvin is a tool that will actually have a grid that it spits out, which I've noticed is pretty accurate. There might be some things that aren't, but usually you can go back to your raw notes and see it pretty clearly. So yeah, time is saved there. It's not a ton of time, but I find that when it comes to the report writing, getting the insights in there quicker, it does help. It's not shaving weeks off a project, that's for sure. But maybe a day or two is you're working a little more efficiently.
Yeah, definitely. So now, like, I think one of the concerns I have, and probably other people, is now with AI in the picture, and you have lots of people use it and maybe sometimes over reliant on it, like for research artifact, right? They all kind of like a good research and bad research, they all kind of look similar. How do you tell the difference between a piece of quality research and surface level hallucinated AI insights?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's that sniff test, right?
Right.
For is this bad research or good research? Uh, there's there's a lot of things that you have to watch out for. So you want to distinguish the two. Is it surface level AI insight, which will typically state the obvious, things that everybody already knows. It again just lacks that nuance or specific context. It could be applied to any product or any user. If it reads more like a summary and not a synthesis, so it just regurgitates what was said and not what it means, that's really important. We're trying to get to a deeper analysis, and that's what we as researchers do. I don't think AI can necessarily do that without us putting that human layer on it. Sometimes it can just feel too balanced. There's there's naturally, it's never easy. It's never a slam dunk, like, oh, everybody obviously feels this way. There's usually some kind of tension or contradiction that should be there, that should be called out.
Can you share an example of like what you mean by this is saying versus this is what it means?
Yeah. So the deeper meaning. So just because somebody did something, or even just because they said something, that doesn't necessarily mean the solution is to give them exactly what they said, or, oh, they must need this instead. What it means is like taking that extra level of analysis and saying like, okay, why are they doing this? And thinking that through. Why are they saying this? And I don't think AI right now is very good at making that leap and sometimes connecting the dots to something that happened possibly a half hour before in the interview. I often see that deeper level is not there if a researcher's just kind of feeding it to ChatGPT and spitting it out. You kind of can see that. And it might be something that I just can see because I've been doing it for so long. I know I'm like, this is not a human being that wrote this. There's more to this finding than just this surface level. This is what they did or said. And again, if it's not traceable, right? You can't, if they're not giving you an idea of where in the data it came from, that's an issue. And if you have like a sniff test is really, does the artifact really look too polished? And it's just saying a lot, but really it's very little. Like it can be verbose, right? Sometimes you get these chat GPT responses or these AI responses that are really long, but in essence, it's not really telling you anything that a couple lines wouldn't tell. So that's something I look out for too.
So, how did your clients react when you suggest introducing AI to your service and workflow?
So some are not for it at all. So there are some clients, typically, possibly like a financial client. They really protect user data. They're not going to be embracing AI with open arms, especially with all the data protection that they do. And they will specifically ask, "Are you using any of these tools? If so, we cannot allow you to use it for this study." And I totally understand and respect that. But most clients are perfectly fine with it. They're not okay with the cost. Cost is usually, if I have to build it into my itemization of my bids, it is these tools, the ones that are really built for UX analysis, like I mentioned, Hey Marvin, they are very expensive. And as an independent consultant, usually I have to pass on that cost, or increase my rates because of it. And I'm seeing that too with agencies. Sometimes I will subcontract with design agencies that are, they need more research help, or their researchers are stretched thin. They have these tools. And in that regard, I'm asked, like, we've invested in these tools. Please, you must use these tools. We need to prove ROI, that these tools are worth the cost, that they're helping us with our research. So sometimes I'm told to actually use them.
Interesting. Looking forward to the future, so where do you think this is headed in terms of design research in the next few years?
Uh, that's a really good question. I'm a little scared, but I'm also, like I mentioned, I'm staying open-minded. Right now, Gen AI is like that super eager intern, right? Fast, always available, willing to do the grunt work, occasionally overconfident, and sometimes wildly wrong, right? But I think that there is room, and I think it will mature and become more of that junior collaborator. Where is it going to do that? I think it's possible. I really do, that it will become smarter at synthesis at scale. So tracing those insights back to exact quotes, sometimes it hallucinates. I think it's going to be able to do that with more accuracy, with video. I think it'll do an even better job at flagging contradictions or gaps in the data. What I think is interesting, and I've been talking to some other research moderators about this, is soon imagining that it could be AI assistance in the flow of a moderation. So, suggesting follow up questions in the moment, summarizing the themes as the conversation unfolds. It's already, we already have note takers, but maybe it's keeping track of timing or doing some tech troubleshooting for us. I think that if we have some democratization that's still going on with research, maybe it's prompting with coaching, right? Letting a junior or a person who is not a researcher, but a person who does research, letting them know in the moment that question might be leading, want help rephrasing or something like that. I can imagine these tools being helpful in that way and actually getting to that point. But I do think that our role will change as that happens. So we have to be the sense maker ultimately, right? The tactical work might be handled by AI, but we will need to do the prioritization, the making, being that steward of research integrity, vetting all the AI output, preserving the human user voice. So we have to get stronger in our research ops skills, storytelling, systems thinking. There's just so much that we're going to still have to do, and be needed even more for.
Very well said. And I think it really aligns with what I'm seeing as well. Like, I know in the podcast world, there's already a host that's using AI to do some sort of the assistant and coaching thing you just
Oh,
mentioned.
wow.
It's yeah, it's already happening. What's some of the skills that the future UXers should absolutely master in the AI powered world?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's more than just prompt engineering. I think definitely prompt engineering is going to be very important. But I think it's more AI literacy with a researcher's mindset. So the ability to critically interpret AI generated output. So, again, AI can summarize, it can cluster, it can rephrase, but it doesn't truly understand. So we need to work on our skills to ask, what is this insight based on? Challenge those outputs. Is this true for all users or just some? Spot those patterns and gaps. I feel like we're going to be even more like interrogators of the AI output. And I think the UX researchers specifically who thrive in an AI powered world will be the ones who stay curious, open minded, questioning what's presented, and really remains grounded in the human needs, and is not willing to just forego checking in with those real users. Yeah, you have to do that.
Yeah. And in your opinion, like no matter how good AI tools get, what aspect should absolutely stay human in research that AI would never be able to replace?
You know, a researcher knows when a participant pauses just a beat too long, or when their body language contradicts their words. We're very good at being lie detectors. We can sense hesitation, excitement, all sorts of emotions, confusion. So it's not, again, just about what someone says, but how they say it. And AI can transcribe or summarize, but it doesn't feel the humanness, it misses out on that. That's where we shine. And that's really what I hope AI never replaces.
I have a hard time seeing AI replace in that aspect. And I think all the researchers out there, you should be feeling safe. You're never getting replaced by AI.
Yeah, I do believe that. And I joked in my presentation, AI won't replace us. It can't do our job, but someone using AI in a very effective way will. So we have to stay up on this, and we have to learn how to harness its power for good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kyle, for sharing your experience. I really love your stance on how to actually use AI to aid design research and still stay human and producing very high quality research reports and artifacts. So, and I also love all the practical tips and tactics you shared today as well. So, where can people follow you or learn more about research?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I love this, and the time just flew right by. I could talk about this forever. But where to find me? Website usable usable interface.com. That's my company website. I have a podcast, the UX Consultants Lounge, and that website is just uxconsultantslounge.com.
Thank you so much again, Kyle. I learned a lot.
Oh, thank you, Ran. I love doing it. So thanks for having me.
I hope Kyle's perspective give you clarity or even some guardrails on how to use AI in your own design practice. If this episode sparked something in you, please drop a comment below. I'd love to hear how you're using AI in your work. I'll see you in the next episode.